Aspects. Deepwokens form of races. All aspects originally started as normal humans, but due to the power of the song through the worship of gods and change in environmental factors, every human would eventually evolve throughout generations to become more animalistic in their features, either as a way to adapt to climates or through worshipping gods, which can also change the features of people, forming a new aspect. Also, I'm live on Twitch. You should watch me on Twitch right now. I'm live on Twitch. If you're watching this video as it comes out, I'm live on Twitch. Now that you understand how Deepwokens races came to be, let me enlighten you on their individual statistics. Starting with Adrets. Adrets hail from what is now the Central Luminant primarily. Before the Central Authority was formed, the original territory was owned by the Adretian people under what used to be known as the Adretian Empire. However, that was left in ruins by a phenomenon known as the God Storm, which was stopped by the new Central Authority leader known as Drawless Heir, which led to the conception of the Central Authority with him at their peak, which is why many Central Authority members are Adrets. Watch the faction lore video for more information on them. The race itself has various markings along their faces and bodies which generally begin to form around maturity. In-game they don't mean much, but as far as the lore goes, the markings are meant to tell your fate and what type of person you are as well as your life path. Adrets are considered the closest to normal humans as unlike every other aspect in the game, they don't have animalistic traits and only have markings making their non-human allegiance unknown. Also, I have a bit of a sore throat right now while recording, so that's why I may sound a little bit weird. Next up are Canors. Canors are one of the few aspects in-game that don't have a set faction, as in lore all of the Canor original factions died out, leaving only strays which would join random factions over time. The Canors are loyal by nature as well as being highly resemblant of dogs. Due to Canor's natural sense of loyalty, they usually end up being highly trusted members of factions, regardless of which they join, such as Claris of the Black Divers, Morid of the Authority, and Alpha of the Ignition Union. We also don't know what Luminant they come from primarily because of the fact that there are no more Canorian factions or history on past ones. Next up are the Capras. Similarly to Canors, their place of origin is unknown. Capras are goat-resemblant beings with various special abilities, all gained from the worship of different beings. The three mark ability variants each Capra can have are the mark of the Moon's Eye and two other beings, which we don't know anything about, simply known as the Mother and the First Beast, Nemet and Uric. The Capra NPC Ezra also calls himself a follower of Ku, as well as the ability for Capras being known as the Mark of Ku. So they most likely become Capras from humans through worship of the godlike being known as Ku. But we have no real information on the god Ku. The variants of the Capra race are also named after these gods, with the variants being Ku, Nemet, and Uric, with Nemet likely being some sort of festivity-related god in relation to farming and fertility and sort of like farmland or food, as the only other mention of Nemet is in the weapon's Nemet Sickle, which is a farming tool, and also Nemet's mark is the one that lets you stave off hunger. Uric is likely a god in relation to sanity or insanity, as his version of the ability slows sanity loss. And Ku could be some sort of god or goddess revolving around fertility and life, as he increases health regen with the mark. Next up is Seltor, not Keltor. Some people are shocked that people say Keltor, other people insist that it's correct. It is Seltor. Seltors hail from the Southern Luminant and the now lost and drowned city of New Seltor, which was sunk by the Ministry. They're pretty rare to see in the game, like as far as NPCs go, because their entire land was destroyed and most of them are dead. So the only remaining Seltors that we really know of are like Duke and a few other strays. Watch my factions video to learn more about all that sunken city stuff. There really isn't much lore involving them other than the fact that their city was sunken and they don't really exist anymore. Next up are Chrysids. Now Chrysids are the moth-based race, which hail from the island known as Lullaby Isle, which currently isn't in-game, but is in the Central Luminant in the area known as Markor, surrounded by mountains. Now, not all Chrysids are native to the Lullaby Isle, but those who are speak a language known as the Moonlit Dialect, and they are known as the Iekta, or Iekti for plural, and they are primarily farmers, as the Lullaby Isle supports very fertile soil. Now, the Lullaby Isles actually has a pretty cool arrangement, or at least it's described to have one. So basically, it's an archipelago, which is pretty much like a bunch of scattered islands that are connected by bridges, and then it's surrounded by a massive mountain range. So it's pretty much surrounded all the way except it's open from the front, so it's kind of like a crescent of mountains, and that's known as the Stone's Eye, which is pretty sick. And then, you know, the city is town hall and all that stuff is on the center island, which is, I guess, the echelon of the city, or it's called the echelon of the Lullaby Isle. And then the Stone's Eye range is supposed to be like really tall, like it's like you can't climb those mountains because of how high they go. You know, who knows? Maybe they even lead into the depths, we don't really know. For whatever reason, they have connections to the Great Hive Aratel, which is because they share a common ancestor with the Hive races all being derived from bugs. However, the Chrysids did leave due to conflicting views on technology that they had with the Hive, likely being more pacifistic in nature. The split didn't ruin relations between Chrysids and the Hive, and they are still considered welcome to the Great Hive and are considered citizens to an extent. So I guess they're just chill with it. Now, the Lullaby Isle sounds nice, but they're a very negatively religious place, with their leader being known as the Lady Confessor, who decides what is considered a sin within their isle, able to change the laws as she sees fit, and then harshly punishing those who break her rules, which is the reason why so many non-Iacta Chrysids emigrated out of the Lullaby Isles. Next up are the Etrians, a snake-like race of people, and they are one of the most common races found in game. The Etrians come from the Empire of Etria and have been in a pretty sorry state after their king disappeared, likely sealed away by the Ministry and replaced with the current Lord Regent, with most of it being based on the faction of Etria, so go watch the factions video. Then we have Felinors, the cat-based race, and they have some of the least lore in the game. We know that the Felinors hail from the Central Luminant, and there used to be a kingdom of Felinors near the island of Markor, but it is heavily implied that the kingdom no longer exists or was destroyed, leaving Felinors scattered across Lumen. And next up are Ganymedes, who are based on snails and one of the two Deepwoken races inspired by Hollow Knight, the other being Vesperians, who are based on beetles and also Hollow Knight. Watch my full Hollow Knight playthrough on the live channel. Anyway, Ganymedes and Vesperians both kind of need to be discussed together because they both come from a mother race of sorts along with the Chrysids. However, the Chrysids were added later, so it's kind of a retcon, so I'll be going over all of that in a bit of detail here. Essentially, during the Cataclysm, there was an old ancestral race for these three which no longer exists. No, it's not the Primal Vesperians. When the Tides came, they split off into two groups. Group 1, who used the Lifeweave attunement of the bugs to defend against the Tides, and this group was made up of mostly Vesperians and was later retconned to consist of Vesperians and Chrysids. And then there's Group 2, which decided to embrace the drowning and live in the depths below, adapting to its harsh conditions. That group would become Ganymedes over time. Now, Chrysids are supposed to have been with the Vesperians in lore before branching off a few years later, but that was kind of retconned into lore because they were added a few years after the game released. So as a whole, the Vesperians and Ganymedes still have relation, which is why in-game you can be cousins with Ganymede players as a Vesperian and vice versa as well. And as well as the fact that Vesperians actually have glowing Ganymede eyes under their masks, or at least they're supposed to if you like look at your weird character clipped through your face. Next are the Gremmers, a deer-based race who hail from the Southern Luminant in its temperate forest while worshipping the goddess Neve. They eventually morphed into Gremmers, being resemblant of deer. When the Southern Luminant was destroyed, they became nomadic and moved across the Luminant, but that's really about it for them. All the other lore is kind of scattered through weapon descriptions like that bow legendary weapon, or just stuff about the faction themselves, but there really isn't too much lore involving them. They're nomads, their land was destroyed. That's all you gotta know. They're basically the Native Americans of Deepwoken. Next are the Khans, a monkey-like race who traditionally wear crowns as jewelry. They primarily come from the Western Luminant and are prominent within the Hundreds Legion. However, a really important thing to remember is that if it's in relation to the Hundreds Legion, its lore is underdeveloped, because the only lore in existence for Khans is the lore I just said. And that goes for everything in the Hundreds Legion. The faction itself is underdeveloped in lore, their weapons are underdeveloped in lore, and even the primary race that comes from them is underdeveloped in lore. Now, the final normally obtainable race that we have here are the Terrans, a bird-like race that still follows some of the birdly tradition. I'm not joking, by the way. They like to live in mountains up high, and upon reaching maturity, the young Terrans will craft a really good glider after being taught by their parents, and then they glide away from home and find a new place to live on their own. That is the lore of this race. It's really funny, honestly, just knowing that they're basically just birds. Now, next up with the first exclusive race is going to be Lightborn. Lightborn are the hybrids born from the reproduction of the Celestials, who are angels, and any normal human, or any other aspect. Now, most of the unobtainable races have a lot of lore because the devs love to write lore for their OCs, more than they like writing lore for the players who play their game. Anyway, the Lightborn were involved in a war with the Celestials against the drowned gods in the depths. The castle in the sky, which is now destroyed, was destroyed in this war. When the Kiersguard of Lair 2 were sent through hypnotism by Etheron to kill and destroy the city. After losing the war, the remaining Celestials in Lightborn either retreated, or lost their will to fight, or were killed by the Hundreds, which is why they're so scant to see in game. Lightborn are also immortal and have eternal youth being unable to age past their prime years. Then there are the Heliodar, which is a Phoenix-based exclusive race. The Heliodar have no known lore, so nothing for this segment, but if I didn't bring it up, I'd get a trillion comments asking about where Heliodar is. Sadly, there is no lore really involving them, or it's all being gatekept because it's a developer race. And next up is Drakard. Drakard hail from the Northern Luminant and are worshippers of the Elder Edenkite. They're based on dragons and are mostly nomadic, and the race is exclusive to moderators. In lore, the Drakards are peaceful students of the Edenkite that are good mediators of conflict resolution, and they resolve issues between parties as peacefully as possible, and that's all. Similarly to Heliodar, there is also Auroran, which is a subrace of Gremmers. Now this race has no known lore, but my personal theory is that the Aurorans are a group of people potentially directly connected to the goddess Neve. Next up is Aberrant Capra, which is the only race which has only been given to one person, being Pseudomesh, the art contest winner and creator of the Light's Final Toll. The lore behind this race is basically if a Capra woman is pregnant and spends excess time in the depths, it causes changes during the fetal stages of development, resulting in a Capra child born without a mask and with various defects, such as 4 horns and spikes protruding out of their face, which often kill them. The spikes in the face are a reference to real-life goats who need to have their horns filed and shaved, otherwise older goats can have horns which overgrow and puncture the face. Aberrant Capras in lore are very rare because not a lot of pregnant women are in the depths, and even then, the Aberrant Capras who are born often die before reaching adulthood due to the terrible birth defects, and that's if they're even born. Most of them are stillborn or miscarriaged. And then finally, we have Primal Vesperian, a subrace of Vesperian. This race is not the ancestral race for Vesperians and Ganymedes. Instead, they come from an older group of Vesperians within the Hive who are mostly extinct and may be related to royalty, but they no longer really exist in the game, at least not commonly, which is why only 2 people have it and both of them are devs. I think it's supposed to be like an alpha variant, like the alpha best genetic royalty Vesperians, but who knows, that's not confirmed. And the final race is the race every aspect eventually started as, which are base humans. Untouched by the song, humans no longer exist except for a few. The only humans in the entire Deepwoken verse are the members of the band Metallica used for the Metallica collaboration event. Anyway, that is all. Shoutouts to members Green, Pickle, Goobka, Highcard, and Drizzy Drake Fan. Hope you all enjoyed, watch my live channel and my live streams. I love you all, have an amazing day, and goodbye.